up? I'm muchellebyt, and in this video I am talking podcasts. If you didn't know, I'm a big fan of the podcast. Yes, it started with cereal. If you've never listened to a podcast before, it's basically like a YouTube video, except obviously no visuals, and it's very long form content. So podcasts can be anywhere from like 30 minutes to an hour and a half. I don't listen to like a huge range of podcasts, so I am just going to tell you my top 5 podcasts, and we will get straight into the video, shall we? So probably my favorite podcast in terms of just like fabulous content, fabulous podcasters, recommended to me by a babe and friend of mine, is Call Your Girlfriend. If you haven't listened to this podcast yet, life-changing.
This week on Call Your Girlfriend, we talk mostly, exclusively about periods and menstruation. We discuss the tampon of the future, with a little sidebar to Black people being left out of the weed boom.
Call Your Girlfriend is hosted by Anne Friedman and Amina Tussauds, and their podcasts range from anything to like feminist issues, political topics, pop culture, just like everything great that I'm interested in a podcast. These two girls are so like witty and engaging. Generally, I will laugh out loud like multiple times within one of their podcasts, which is pretty crazy. Second up, This American Life. I only started listening to this podcast when someone commented and recommended it to me. Before that, I was just like, I see it in the top charts all the time. Like, I don't want to listen to it. I don't feel like I like it. Basically, what This American Life does is they get like a topic. So for instance, middle school, and then they just get a bunch of different people to give their perspectives and stories around that topic.
Denial usually gets a bad rap. Compartmentalizing your feelings, keeping it all inside, pretending things never happened. These are not signs of psychological health. What they're signs of is adulthood.
But as soon as I listened to a few of them, I got really hooked in. Storytelling is just so important. Next up, Stuff You Should Know. I do feel like a lot of the podcasts that I'm mentioning are like very popular and you probably have already heard of them, but whatever. Stuff You Should Know is just, they pick a topic each week. Like recently I listened to their podcast on LSD and they just talk about that topic.
A lot of people associate LSD with hippies, the Grateful Dead, maybe ravers, that kind of thing. But if you really start to kind of poke around popular culture here in the West, you start to see it turn up everywhere.
They explain that so well. As in, they talk about like the history of the topic, they talk about how it's viewed. Like you cannot listen to too many episodes of Stuff You Should Know because otherwise you'll just get overwhelmed. Some examples of their recent episodes: how the Big Bang worked, how labor strikes work, how HIV and AIDS work. So they do take a lot of those topics that, you know, when you think about them, you're just like, that's too fuzzy, like I don't want to think any deeper about that topic because it all just seems too much. They take a lot of those kind of topics and they break them down into like easy digestible chunks that you can actually understand, put it all into a podcast and you listen to it and you feel so much smarter after you listen to it. It's a really good podcast for like conversation topics. Like people will say things that'll remind you of something that you've listened to and Stuff You Should Know, and you can just throw out like some fact that you're like, I sound so intelligent right now. So obviously I had to include this podcast. Serial. If you haven't listened to Serial, what are you doing? Where have you been? How's life going for you? So the first season was about Adnan, which you've probably heard, a guy that was accused of killing a girl, and it was like investigating how legit the case was against him and whether he actually did it, whether he didn't, whether this other guy did it.
Last year, I've spent every working day trying to figure out where a high school kid was for an hour after school one day in 1999. Or if you want to get technical about it, and apparently I do, where a high school kid was for 21 minutes.
You get very into it. It's one of those ones where you just like listen to it non-stop. Basically what she does is she picks like a thing that has happened, an event that has occurred, and she dives like incredibly deeply into that thing that has happened by interviewing all the people that were involved in the thing that happened, looking into the facts and not facts. And if you've never listened to podcasts before, I feel like Serial is a really good place to start because once again, it's those storytelling podcasts, so it'll get you to really start using your imagination. Always good, and it's just incredibly addictive. And then there is The Good Life Project. So this is my one self-development-y podcast that I had to throw in here. I didn't want to make it all self-development-y, but Good Life Project is just that. It's all about like creating a great life.
The higher the demands are for things like working memory, problem solving, decision making, creativity, the more my willpower tank, the more my self-control tank starts to run dry.
Some examples of the episodes: how to prioritize your projects, a different approach. The Gratitude Diaries, a year-long experiment in thanks. I love the guy who hosts this podcast. I feel like his perspective on things is on point, very in line with my own. At the same time, he's always like making me think about different things in life. The only annoying thing is that it's an interview-based podcast. Like, a lot of the podcast episodes are interviews, and I, for some reason, just don't love interviews, unless they're those storytelling interviews that I was talking about. I pick a podcast because I like the host of the podcast, and I like listening to their stories and their perspective on things. When they bring other people in, I'm like, don't really care about those other people. As like very, famous and great as they may be, I'm not that fast. But he does always pop in a solo episode in here and there, so those are the ones that I mainly listen to, while the others are probably really great too. So those are the top podcasts that I listen to and would recommend to absolutely anyone. They're all great, they all make you think, they all give you fresh perspectives, you learn lots from them. So if you have any podcasts that you would recommend to me, please leave them down in the comments below. If you like any of these podcasts, let me know why you like them. Just let me know your thoughts in general. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, follow me on Instagram, do all of that stuff. It's all linked in the description down below. I appreciate you so much, and I will see you soon. I promise you that if you do a few simple things of a Sunday, your week will be dramatically improved.